The Apex Predator showcase had all the dignity of a middle school cafeteria food fight, except with more tentacles and significantly higher stakes. Every cycle, the Galactic Federation's most illustrious member species would gather in the crystal amphitheater of Nexus Prime to engage in what historians would politely term competitive biological documentation, and everyone else called "Who's Got the Scariest Murder Beast?" Ambassador Hadley Brennan sat in the human delegation's modest section, watching the proceedings with the sort of detached amusement typically reserved for watching toddlers argue over toy ownership. Around him, representatives from 47 different worlds leaned forward in their specialized atmospheric seats, each species convinced that this cycle would finally be the one where their homeworld's apex predator would terrify the rest of the galaxy into submission. The event had started, as all bureaucratic disasters do, with the best of intentions. Originally conceived as a xenobiological exchange program designed to foster interspecies understanding, it had somehow evolved into the galactic equivalent of a dick measuring contest. If dicks were made of claws, acid, and existential terror. "Esteemed colleagues," announced the Trilaxian moderator, his crystalline voice chiming through the translation matrix, with all the enthusiasm of a funeral director discussing payment plans. "We now commence the 237th Annual Apex Predator Showcase. Today's presentations shall be evaluated based on lethality coefficient, environmental adaptation, and overall psychological impact on prey species." Brennan suppressed a snort. Psychological impact. Right, because nothing said advanced galactic civilization like rating monsters on their ability to give nightmares. The Vulcan delegation went first, as they always did, their scaled ambassador practically vibrating with pride, as holographic displays materialized above the central platform. The creature that appeared looked like someone had crossed a rhinoceros with a volcanic eruption and given it anger management issues. "Behold the magma render," the Vulcan representative announced, his voice crackling through the heat distortion of his environmental suit. "Indigenous to our homeworld's lava plains, this magnificent predator can reach temperatures of 2,000 degrees Celsius and possesses hide thick enough to deflect plasma artillery." The assembled delegates made appropriately impressed noises. The Aquatic Union's representative actually inflated their gill sacks in what Brennan had learned was their species' equivalent of applause. He made a note in his tablet, "Lava Rhino. Toasty but predictable." Next came the Ethereal Collective, because if there was one thing the universe could count on, it was pretentious energy beings trying to one-up everyone else. Their contribution flickered into existence as a writhing mass of dark energy that seemed to exist in several dimensions simultaneously. The Void Wraith, their speaker intoned, managing to sound both incorporeal and insufferably smug, feeds on the life force of sentient beings and exists partially outside conventional space-time. Physical weapons cannot harm it, and its mere presence induces madness in most carbon-based life forms. Brennan glanced around the amphitheater, noting how several delegates had unconsciously leaned away from the display. The Trilaxian moderator's crystalline structure was actually dimming slightly, which he'd learned was their equivalent of nervous sweating. "Spooky ghost thing," he typed. "Probably weak to flashlights." The presentations continued in escalating absurdity. The Hive Confederation showed off something that looked like a praying mantis had been crossed with a Swiss Army knife, and taught advanced military tactics. The Silicon Senate presented a creature that was essentially a living earthquake with the neural network displayed what could only be described as a telepathic jellyfish that specialized in psychological warfare. Each species tried desperately to outdo the last, their representatives gesturing wildly at holographic monstrosities, while explaining exactly why their particular brand of nightmare fuel was clearly superior to everyone else's. The political undertones were thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. This wasn't just about biology anymore, if it ever had been. This was about establishing dominance, about proving which civilizations deserved respect and which could be safely ignored in the grand theater of galactic politics. Brennan watched it all with the sort of professional detachment that came from years of diplomatic training and a healthy appreciation for cosmic irony. He'd read the files, of course. Earth's Xenobiology Department had prepared extensive documentation on humanity's own apex predators, complete with threat assessments and ecological impact studies. The folder sat in his briefcase, largely ignored while he took notes on the increasingly ridiculous parade of alien death machines. Around him, the other delegates whispered among themselves, making calculations and assessments. Who would they need to appease? Which worlds should they avoid colonizing? The showcase had become an informal but crucial part of galactic diplomacy, a way to establish the pecking order without actually going to war. The human delegation remained notably quiet throughout the proceeding. Ambassador Brennan simply sat there, occasionally jotting down observations, his expression never changing from one of mild professional interest. To the other species, humanity appeared either refreshingly humble or suspiciously confident. Neither assessment was entirely wrong. The atmosphere in the amphitheater shifted when the Hegemony delegation activated their presentation platform. Where other species had offered theatrical displays and dramatic reveals, the insectoid empire simply uploaded their data packet to the central display with the cold efficiency of a death certificate being filed. The silence that followed wasn't the usual polite pause between presentations. This was the kind of silence that occurred when everyone in the room suddenly remembered they were mortal. The creature that materialized in the holographic field defied easy description, mostly because looking at it for too long triggered some deeply buried evolutionary response that screamed hide under something heavy and pray it doesn't find you. If someone had taken every childhood monster ever conceived, fed them steroids and a steady diet of pure nightmare fuel, then let them breed in a laboratory designed by particularly creative sadists, the result might have approximated what the Hegemony called a void reaper. Desedition, Apex Bioform 77 Alpha, announced the Hegemony speaker, their translated voice carrying all the warmth of a medical examiner, describing autopsy findings. Engineered over 43 generations of selective genetic modification. Current specimen measures 47 meters in length, possesses redundant cardiovascular systems, adaptive camouflage capabilities, and molecular-level acid secretion. The creature in the display moved with horrible grace, its 6 limbs ending in appendages that seemed to shift between claws, tentacles, and things that didn't have names in any civilized language. Its hide appeared to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating the disturbing impression that it was somehow more real than its surroundings. Ambassador Brennan tilted his head slightly, watching the presentation with the same clinical interest he'd shown the previous exhibit. He made a note, impressive engineering, probably expensive to maintain. Around the amphitheater, other delegates were having considerably stronger reactions. The ethereal collective's representative had actually flickered out of visible existence for several seconds. The Aquatic Union's ambassador was making rapid clicking sounds that the translation matrix couldn't parse but which definitely wasn't applause. The Void Reaper demonstrates perfect hunting efficiency, the Hegemony speaker continued, apparently oblivious to the growing unease in the room. It has successfully eliminated all native apex predators on 17 worlds during our expansion phase. No known defensive measures have proven effective against its adaptive capabilities. That last bit hit the assembled delegates like a cold shower made of liquid fear. This wasn't just a biological showcase anymore. This was a demonstration of military capability, disguised as scientific presentation. The Hegemony wasn't just showing off their monster. They were making a statement about their expansion plan. Brennan glanced around the amphitheater, noting the subtle shifts in posture among the various delegations. The Vulcan ambassador's heat signature was spiking, their species equivalent of nervous sweating. The Silicon Senate representatives were transmitting rapid data bursts to each other, their crystalline forms flickering with increased processing activity. The political landscape of the galaxy had just shifted, and everyone knew it. The Hegemony speaker wasn't finished. Additional capabilities include electromagnetic pulse generation, limited precognitive sensory arrays, and the ability to survive in hard vacuum for extended periods. The specimen's reproductive cycle allows for rapid population expansion when suitable prey density is achieved. Rapid population expansion, suitable prey density. The euphemisms were almost charming in their transparent malevolence. The Hegemony had essentially just announced their intention to seed these things across inhabited worlds, and watch the buffet unfold. Several species began making discreet inquiries about mutual defense pacts. The neural network started broadcasting what could only be diplomatic panic on multiple frequencies. Even the usually unflappable Trilaxian moderator was showing stress fractures in their crystalline matrix. Through it all, Ambassador Brennan continued taking notes, with the sort of methodical calm typically associated with accountants reviewing tax documents. When the Hegemony presentation concluded to nervous silence, he actually raised his hand. "Fascinating specimen," he said, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere with casual professionalism. "I have a few technical questions, if you don't mind." The Hegemony speaker's compound eyes focused on him with what might have been surprise. "Proceed. The acid secretion you mentioned, is that a contact-based delivery system, or can the creature project it at range?" "Contact-based primarily. Range is limited to approximately 3 meters. Brennan made another note. "And the electromagnetic pulse generation, does that affect the creature's own nervous system, or have you engineered adequate shielding?" "The bioform possesses natural electromagnetic resistance. The pulse capability does not impair its own functions." "Impressive. And the precognitive sensory arrays? Are we talking genuine temporal perception, or enhanced pattern recognition based on environmental data analysis?" The questions continued for several minutes, each one delivered with the same bland professional interest. Brennan wasn't challenging the Hegemony's claims. He was simply gathering data with the thoroughness of someone conducting a technical review. The other delegates watched this exchange with growing bewilderment. Here was the representative of a species that had barely achieved faster-than-light travel, calmly discussing the technical specifications of a bioweapon that had the rest of the galaxy reconsidering their defense budgets. Either humans were too naive to understand the implications of what they were seeing, or they were confident enough in their own capabilities to remain completely unfazed by the galaxy's newest apex predator. When the technical discussion concluded, Brennan settled back in his seat and resumed his note-taking. The Hegemony speaker seemed almost disappointed by the lack of visible terror. "Thank you for the detailed presentation," Brennan said pleasantly. "Very informative. I assume we'll be moving on to the next delegation now." The Trilaxian moderator managed to regain some composure. "Actually, Ambassador Brennan, we were wondering if humanity would like to contribute to this cycle's showcase. Your species has been notably absent from previous presentations." A subtle shift rippled through the amphitheater. After the Hegemony's demonstration, everyone was curious about what the quiet newcomers might have to offer. Would they reveal some hidden military capability, present their own bioengineered nightmare, or simply admit that Earth's predators couldn't compete on this cosmic scale? Brennan looked up from his tablet, expression thoughtful. "Well, since you asked so nicely, I suppose we could share something from our files. Nothing too dramatic. We wouldn't want to upset anyone." The understatement hung in the air like a challenge waiting to be recognized. Ambassador Brennan accessed his briefcase with the unhurried movements of someone who had all the time in the universe and knew it. The holographic display flickered to life above the central platform, replacing the Hegemony's nightmare with something considerably more mundane. A fish appeared in the projection field. Not a particularly impressive fish by galactic standard. No glowing appendages, no obvious weaponry, no reality-bending abilities, just a roughly torpedo-shaped creature with a mouthful of triangular teeth, cruising through blue-green water with lazy, economical movement. The silence that followed was different from the tense quiet that had greeted the Void Reaper. This was the kind of silence that occurred when an entire amphitheater, full of advanced beings, tried to figure out if they were missing something obvious, or if the humans had completely misunderstood the assignment. This, Brennan announced with the same professional courtesy he'd shown throughout the proceedings, is Carcharodon carcharias, common designation, great white shark, one of Earth's more efficient marine predators. The ethereal collective's representative flickered back into visibility, apparently deciding that a fish posed less existential threat than engineered bioweapons. Several delegates exchanged what could only be described as confused glances, though the anatomical variations made this more of an interpretive exercise. The Hegemony speaker actually tilted their head, compound eyes focusing on the display with what might have been amusement. "Ambassador Brennan, this appears to be a standard aquatic vertebrate. Are you certain this qualifies as an apex predator?" "Oh, absolutely," Brennan replied, tapping his tablet to enhance certain features of the hologram. Let me walk you through the specifications. Average length, 6 meters. Maximum recorded length, just over 8 meters. Bite force approximately 18,000 newtons. Jaw structure allows for a bite radius of nearly 120 degrees. He paused to let the numbers sink in, then continued with the same casual tone he might use to discuss weather patterns. The dentition is particularly interesting. Multiple rows of serrated, triangular teeth, designed for maximum tissue damage. Lost teeth are replaced continuously throughout the creature's lifespan. Estimated replacement rate, approximately 35,000 teeth over 60 to 70 years of life. The Vulcan ambassador's heat signature flickered slightly. Even by their standards, those were respectable numbers. The sensory capabilities are where things get truly fascinating. Brennan continued, warming to his subject. Electroreception allows detection of bioelectric fields down to 5 billionths of a volt. The creature can literally sense the electrical activity of a prey animal's gills from several kilometers away. Olfactory sensitivity permits tracking of chemical traces at concentrations of 1 part per billion. He gestured at the hologram, which obligingly zoomed in on the shark's snout region. The lateral line system provides 3-dimensional spatial awareness through pressure wave detection. Essentially, the creature creates a detailed sensory map of everything moving in its environment across significant distances. The Silicon Senate representatives were transmitting rapid calculations to each other, their crystalline forms flickering with increased processing activity. Even they had to admit that those sensory specifications were impressive for a biological organism. Now the hunting methodology is what really sets this species apart. Brennan continued, his tone never losing its conversational quality. The approach pattern typically involves ascending from deeper water at angles calculated to place the sun behind the predator, eliminating visual detection by prey species. Attack velocity can exceed 50 kilometers per hour. The hologram shifted to show the shark in motion, its powerful tail driving it through the water with predatory grace. Several delegates found themselves unconsciously leaning back from the display. The initial strike delivers the full force of the creature's momentum concentrated through those serrated teeth I mentioned earlier. The technique is colloquially known as breaching. The predator's velocity is sufficient to carry both hunter and prey completely clear of the water's surface. A new holographic sequence began, showing exactly what Brennan was describing. The shark erupted from the ocean like a guided missile, its massive form suspended in midair for a moment before gravity reasserted control. The sheer kinetic energy on display was undeniable. Tissue damage from the initial bite typically induces hemorrhagic shock in prey species, Brennan noted matter-of-factly. However, the shark often doesn't need to deliver a killing blow immediately. The creature has learned to inflict strategic wounds and then withdraw, allowing blood loss and trauma to weaken the prey before consumption. The Aquatic Union's representative was making rapid clicking sounds again, though this time they sounded considerably less dismissive than before. One of the more remarkable aspects of this predator is its adaptability, Brennan continued. While primarily marine individuals have been observed in brackish water, river systems, and even temporary freshwater environments, geographic distribution spans most of Earth's oceanic region. The species has remained essentially unchanged for approximately 400 million years. That last number hit the assembled delegates like a cold wave. 400 million years of evolutionary refinement. This wasn't just a predator. It was a time-tested killing machine that had been perfecting its craft since before most of their civilizations had crawled out of whatever primordial ooze they'd originated from. Environmental pressure has continued to select for improved hunting efficiency throughout this period. Brennan added casually, the current iteration represents the optimization of predatory capability across geological timescale. The Hegemony speaker's compound eyes were now focused entirely on the holographic shark, their earlier amusement apparently evaporating. This creature evolved naturally, without technological enhancement. Completely natural, Brennan confirmed, though I should mention that this particular specimen represents what we consider a relatively small example of Earth's marine predators. The amphitheater fell silent again, but this was a different kind of quiet. This was the silence of beings beginning to reassess their fundamental assumptions about what constituted dangerous. Relatively small, the Terlaxian moderator managed.
their crystalline structure dimming noticeably. Brennan looked up from his tablet, expression mild. Oh yeah, this is just one of our smaller examples. Earth's ecosystem includes significantly larger predatory species. He paused thoughtfully, then added with characteristic understatement, would you be interested in seeing something big? The collective intake of breath from 47 different respiratory systems created what could only be described as a symphony of nervous anticipation. Ambassador Brennan took this as an affirmative response and tapped his tablet again. The great white shark faded from the holographic display, replaced by something that made several delegates question their life choices. The new creature was sleek, black and white, and roughly 3 times the size of the previous exhibit. Orcinus orca, Brennan announced with the same casual professionalism he'd maintained throughout. Common designation, killer whale, though the translation software seems to have trouble with Earth's tendency toward dramatic naming convention. The creature in the display moved through the water with predatory grace that made the shark look like a swimming appetizer. Its sheer size was immediately apparent. The holographic scaling showed it dwarfing the previous specimen like a starfighter next to a cargo hauler. Average length, 8 to 10 meters. Maximum recorded length, approximately 10.5 meters. Mass, up to 6 metric tons. Brennan paused, letting those numbers settle. Brain-to-body mass ratio is among the highest recorded for Earth species. The creature demonstrates advanced problem-solving capabilities, complex social structures, and collaborative hunting strategies. The neural network's representative was broadcasting what could only be described as excited confusion. A predator with advanced intelligence was something most species preferred to avoid thinking about. The hunting methodology varies based on prey species. Brennan continued, manipulating the hologram to show different behavioral patterns. For marine mammals, the orca employs what we call carousel feeding. The pack works together to create a coordinated attack pattern that prevents escape. For larger prey, they've been observed using beaching techniques, essentially launching themselves onto shorelines to capture terrestrial animals. The display shifted to show exactly that, a massive black and white form erupting from shallow water onto a beach, seizing prey before sliding back into the ocean with casual efficiency. The species has also demonstrated tool use, teaching behaviors, and what our xenobiologists classify as cultural transmission of hunting techniques across generations. Different populations have developed specialized predation methods based on their local environment. The hegemony speaker was no longer showing any trace of amusement. Ambassador, what prey species require such elaborate hunting strategies? Well, mostly other whales. Brennan replied matter-of-factly. Orcas regularly hunt species significantly larger than themselves. Which brings me to our next example. The killer whale faded, replaced by something that defied immediate comprehension. The new creature was so large that the holographic display had to adjust its scaling parameters twice before managing to fit the entire organism in the projection field. Physater macrocephalus. Sperm whale. Length, up to 20 meters. Mass, up to 80 metric tons. Brennan's voice remained conversational, as if he were discussing grocery lists rather than living submarines. The largest toothed predator currently active on Earth. The assembled delegates stared at what amounted to a biological dreadnought, cruising through deep ocean waters. Its massive square head alone was larger than most of their previous predator examples. The sperm whale specializes in deep ocean hunting, regularly diving to depths exceeding 2,000 meters to hunt colossal squid. These engagements typically occur in complete darkness under crushing atmospheric pressure. The whale uses echolocation powerful enough to stun prey at close range. Brennan tapped his controls again. Speaking of size, though the sperm whale represents our smaller large whale category, for perspective, the holographic field expanded dramatically. The sperm whale, already massive beyond easy comprehension, suddenly looked like a minnow next to the creature that materialized beside it. Balaenoptera musculus. Blue whale. Length, up to 33 meters. Mass, up to 200 metric tons. The largest animal currently known to exist on Earth. The silence in the amphitheater had progressed beyond nervous anticipation into something approaching religious awe. The creature in the display was so enormous that the scaling system was struggling to maintain perspective. It was less an animal than a living geological feature. Now, the blue whale is technically a filter feeder rather than an active predator, Brennan noted with academic precision. However, it consumes up to 4 tons of krill daily during feeding season. The efficiency of its feeding mechanism essentially strips entire oceanic regions of viable prey species. He paused, consulting his tablet with the expression of someone checking a restaurant menu. Of course, these are all contemporary examples. Earth's predatory history includes some rather more dramatic specimens. Another tap, another shift in the display. The blue whale remained for size comparison, as something new materialized, something that made the contemporary specimens look like practice exercises in biological engineering. Carcharucles megalodon, extinct approximately 3 million years, estimated length, up to 20 meters, mass, up to 100 metric tons, bite force approximately 180,000 newtons. The holographic megalodon hung in the display like a fever dream made manifest. Its jaws gaped wide enough to swallow most of the contemporary predator's whole, lined with serrated teeth the size of dinner plates. The megalodon represented the apex of shark evolution during Earth's Cenozoic period. Prey species included early whales, which were considerably smaller than contemporary specimens, due to selective pressure from predation. Brennan looked around the amphitheater, noting the various expressions of shock, awe, and existential terror. This is of course just marine example. Earth's terrestrial predators present their own unique characteristics, as do our aerial species. And then there are the microscopic predators, which operate on completely different principles. The Tralaxian moderator's crystalline structure was now showing stress fractures that definitely hadn't been there an hour ago. Ambassador Brennan, how many apex predator species does Earth currently support? Define apex predator. Brennan replied thoughtfully. If we're using the standard galactic classification of capable of killing and consuming other predator species, then the current count is somewhere around 15,000 documented species, though our xenobiologists suspect the actual number is significantly higher. 15,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. However, Brennan continued with the same conversational tone. That's just contemporary species. The fossil record suggests Earth has supported apex predator ecosystems continuously for approximately 500 million years. The turnover rate has been quite impressive. The Hegemony speaker had gone completely still, which was generally considered a bad sign when dealing with insectoid species. Ambassador, how does any prey species survive in such an environment? Evolutionary pressure, Brennan replied simply. Earth's prey species have had to develop increasingly sophisticated survival mechanisms. Our herbivores tend to be rather well armed by galactic standards. The distinction between predator and prey becomes somewhat academic when you're dealing with creatures like the Cape buffalo or the African elephant. He closed his tablet with a soft click, but perhaps that's a presentation for another cycle. I wouldn't want to overwhelm anyone with too much biological data in a single session. The understatement echoed through the crystal amphitheater like the closing note of a symphony composed entirely of cosmic horror. Around the arena, 46 different species sat in stunned silence, collectively reconsidering their entire understanding of what constituted a dangerous world. In the end, the Hegemony quietly withdrew their expansion proposals. The Void Reaper, for all its engineered lethality, seemed considerably less impressive when compared to a planet that had spent 500 million years perfecting the art of creative violence. Ambassador Brennan packed up his briefcase and prepared to leave, making a final note in his tablet. Next year, bring the microscope footage. They're going to love the tardigrades.